Super Smash Bros. Ultimate is the first installment tempting me to play competitively. It seems really highly technical, even more than Melee, but also like it is an easy entry into the competitive scene. It's a weird contradiction, but it makes competitive play seem more appealing than ever. Like, if you put in the effort, you will be good and you will always be able to outthink anybody's strategy for a constantly evolving metagame. So I have a reason to take interest in the competitive rules, and there are some things I think need to be reconsidered and reevaluated with some of the changes coming. Don't take these so much as demands or criticism, but requests and suggestions to create something that balances the for sport and for money aspects of esports. Before we go any further, if you find you are agreeing with some of these points, consider liking this video or sharing it with others, and maybe subscribe if you want to see more on Smash, Nintendo, and gaming. Also, I do have a Twitter, but I never mention it, but it exists too. As I was saying though, esports has two major angles. The for sports angle of ensuring all matches are fair and decided by skill, and the money angle of making it interesting to watch. In a sense, these two are competing. The more skill-based something becomes, the more predictable everything becomes. But with some chance elements, you can see some impressive turnabouts and upsets that are interesting to watch. If this game is one that enables a constantly evolving metagame, as it looks to me, that will create a bit of a compromise between these two esports angles. In previous games, certain strategies and playstyles have been so effective, the only counter is adopting the same tactics or playstyle, leading to an overfocus on a few strategies and particularly boring matches, both to watch and play. To counter this, often certain elements were banned if nobody figured out a tactic to counter it. Given the much expanded options Ultimate has, there should be a setup that can greatly reduce how much needs to be banned. The first change I'd like to see is Squad Strike becoming the standard mode if it is all one match, as Sakurai said in the Direct. This would require competitive players to demonstrate more skill by becoming good with at least 3 characters from this massive roster, and consider who they want to lead and end with. This will also keep the matches constantly changing and make them much more interesting to watch. I don't care if players are allowed to use an echo of one of their 3, or if all 3 must be entirely unique. I think there would be enough difference that allowing the original and an echo would still work. Another advantage of this change is that it fights against one character dominating the competitive scene. Even if there is a Bayonetta situation, every player will have to select 2 other characters. Now, I get the issue with items. Some are way unbalanced, like the home run bat, or the Pokeballs and assist trophies, and it is unfair if a Bob-omb spawns over your attack. I also do understand that it can give a slight edge if a more balanced item, like the Beam Sword, Ray Gun, or Star Rod, spawns closer to one character, and that it is possible for an item to prevent an attack, by the item pickup taking priority over an intended standard attack, leaving one player open a brief period of time, but long enough to be hit by their opponent. That wouldn't feel good or fair, but I do think it is worth discussing if it is worth it to make matches more interesting to watch, even if items are banned completely from the quarterfinals or semifinals up, and limited items are only allowed for earlier matches. I'd also like to see almost all stages be unbanned, and I think this can actually be done by combining a few new options. The main problems with stages have been unbalanced or random hazards. Scrolling stages, moving the blast zones, and requiring too much focus on traversing the stage and not fighting. Obviously, the stage hazard will fix most of these issues. Other problems include the stage being too big for one-on-one matches, and that is a fair point. Some stages are too big. Walk-offs can also allow certain characters two of my mates to get cheap KOs by stun pushing enemies into the blast zones, and then running back to center stage. Unless it is harder to get locked into combos, those also pose a real problem. The other big ones are that walls allow some characters to get locked against a wall, where they can be pummeled for tons of damage and then easily KO'd. And that ceilings can prevent or increase the likelihood of KOs. I'd contend this isn't that big of an issue, well, apart from preventing the KOs. A skilled player should try to avoid putting themselves in a situation where they can get wall locked or hit into a ceiling that will spike them. Few stages have areas where a player can get into these situations without being partially at fault. But there's one other option. Everybody scoffed at the stage transition, certainly and very obviously being universally banned in competitive play, but it shouldn't be. It could make walls and ceilings much less of an issue. Pair a banned stage with Battlefield or Final Destination, and some of these problems will no longer exist, or be something that can be relied upon. Wall locking is at best temporary. Assuming there aren't better options to get out of stun lock this time, I think it is a smart compromise to expand the number of allowed stages if the issues can be lessened by the stage morphing, even if again, the semifinals don't allow these stages. The final change I'd like to see is to phase out restrictions on stages due to character advantages, especially if the competitive community refuses to use Squad Strike as a standard. Since we now will choose stages before characters, each player can choose a character or characters who are okay or decent on the stage. There will be enough character choices it is fair to expect a good competitive player to be able to get good with a handful of characters. Not every character, but enough to be able to have a main good on every stage, especially if stage morph can be used to make things more neutral. Maybe I've missed some of the issues that led to some of these rules, but some certainly seem like melee bans that haven't been re-evaluated. If you have more familiarity with competitive Smash Brothers and my suggestions wouldn't solve the core issue, by all means explain the issue from your perspective. If you can't find something I missed, then please consider and discuss these possible changes and compromises for Ultimate with others in the competitive community. Otherwise, yeah, those are the biggest changes I'd like to see. I mean, I'd also be fine with allowing more than 2 people in matches, especially in a novice bracket where the top performers are given a shot against the pros. I think that a novice bracket is actually somewhat common, but I like the idea of throwing the best challengers against the pros to see what happens. But otherwise, what changes would all of you guys like to see? Some I mentioned, some I didn't.